Everybody. So thank you so much for joining us. It's really exciting to see people from other countries and other parts of this country, the United States, joining. It's fantastic. We've been doing this for years in the local setting here in the library in Vista, California. So it's fantastic to see folks tuning in from all around. And we're excited to be bringing you a topic that I've been working on for a whole year. I started with the Sierra Club in April of last year, and one of the three campaigns that I was destined to work on is a campaign on building electrification, knowing that this is where we can put some real concrete action into climate crisis and addressing the climate crisis is with building electrification. So it's been a long year of learning curve. I've worked with people all up and down the state who are doing this work with Sierra Club. I've watched them pass their building ordinances in different cities. And I'm super excited that this work is happening now here in San Diego with the San Diego Building Electrification Coalition, which we started, I guess it got kicked off around November and December. And it's really started to gel now by this time. We have a number of organizations in the coalition, and Robert's going to be talking more about that. So without further ado, I'm really happy that you all have joined us tonight. And I'm going to pass it off to Robert to start this presentation. I also want to remind folks, please stay muted. And we do want you to put your questions into the chat box so that we can have a healthy discussion at the end of the presentation. And we want to hear your concerns and thoughts about building electrification. I tend to go really nerdy during the Q&A and talk nerdy stuff, but I want to hear what you guys have, what your thoughts are on environmental justice and lots of other things too. So every question is worthy tonight. We appreciate you all coming. And Robert, if you want to start sharing your screen, take it away.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction, Carl. I'm really glad to be here. So excited to see so many people here attending this webinar, where we're going to be discussing why it's so important to eliminate natural gas from the buildings we live and work in. A little bit about myself. My name is Robert Carr, and I'm a local sustainability consultant who strives to make the built environment more sustainable. I have a master's in sustainability leadership, and I'm a lead AP for operation maintenance of existing buildings, and I'm also a Living Future accreditation. So, with Karl, I'm part of the SDBEC, and I co-chair the messaging working group. Many of you already know Karl as the president of this association, North County Climate Change Alliance. He's also the conservation organizer for the Sierra Club San Diego and is an active member for the SDBEC. He has a degree in electrical engineering and helped co-found the San Diego Hub for Sunrise Movement, a youth climate justice organization. All right, so we kind of already went through the norms. Please make sure you can remain muted. Any questions you have, put those in the chat. I'll be glad to answer them at the end. And like we said, the presentation is being recorded. So this presentation will start by introducing the SDBEC, which the NCCCA has just joined, its mission and its resources, and resources we have to help this transition to building electrification. Then we'll discuss at a high level what is building electrification and how we can electrify buildings and why this is so important. Then Karl and I are going to dive down into the many health issues associated with burning natural gas in buildings. And then Karl will start talking about the environmental justice issues associated with building electrification. And then lastly, like Karl said, he's going to dive deep into technology and get a little nerdy on you, but that's always fun. So looking forward to that. So a little bit about the San Diego Building Electrification Coalition. We were formed in November 2020 to advocate for building electrification. It's a coalition of community, environmental, and civic organizations. And we're currently talking with other sectors, including labor, to try to expand the coalition, make it a little more holistic. We provide educational presentations just like this one to the public, and we're also trying to develop, in the process of developing BE training programs for builders and installers and homeowners, because we're really trying to get more people out there, because there's definitely been stories of people trying to install, say, heat pump water heater and trying to find a contractor that really is comfortable doing that. And then lastly, our goal is also to reach out to cities in the region to advocate for REACH codes, building electrification REACH codes, which go beyond the current building code we have now. To require all electric in new development and ban any new gas hookups. So as you can see here, all the different logos for the organizations that are now part of the coalition. This list is growing by the week, by the day, so really excited about that. And so, like I said, we are advocating for building new constructions for homes and buildings. And I want to repeat that is that for right now, we're just focusing on new construction and not on trying to get existing building stock to electrify right away, because that's a lot more challenging. We'll kind of explain why that is. So we just launched our new website. It's been a work in progress, and we're really happy with it. It has many resources for learning about and creating all electric buildings. This includes a questionnaire for technical assistance, which will allow our experts in building electrification to help those wishing to make their buildings and homes electric. So that's really cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you on a quick tour. So if you typed in sdbec.org, and maybe someone want to put that in the chat, you come to this webpage and you can see that there's some drop-down menus at the top. We're already trying to get you to take action right here. And then our mission is here. Some of the best ways to get information from us is to go in and give us your information, your email, so we can send you updates for all things that we're doing. And then the intake form for that technical assistance is right here. Any upcoming events and webinars are there as well. So far, our tech people are really excited to kind of help people out. We've gotten 3 so far, and they're really looking for some more contributions there. In the events drop down, we have upcoming events. Our past webinars are here, so you can find those on our YouTube channel. And then real quick about our resources page. There's more than I could possibly go through, but there's there's links for learning about building electrification, things that have to deal with health, equitable access, a just transition, builders and contract resources for people who are trying to electrify their homes and businesses, homeowner resources, videos, just a ton of stuff here. So please have a look at your early convenience. And then lastly, we've got this take action. So we're trying to get people to sign a petition for building electrification so that when we go and advocate for this to our electeds, we've got all this list of people that are really want to do that. So go ahead and sign that if you feel comfortable. Also have one for Mothers Up Front and Earth Justice there as well. And then if you just want to join the coalition as a member or want to volunteer for the SDBEC or be part of one of our working groups, go ahead and click the Join Us button and get started there. And then lastly, please follow us on social media, YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. There we go. All right. So if you're interested in joining as an individual member and as a volunteer, we have a meeting that's on the 13th at 4 p.m. And that's for our messaging group. And then you can also join the coalition by visiting our website. So I just realized we just had our coalition meeting today. So that date is wrong. So please go to our website and look to the proper date. I think it's a month from today is our next coalition meeting. And then, oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. And then if you want to email me, I'll be glad to take any questions you may have. My email is robert.carr1307@gmail.com. All right, so what is building electrification? All right, BE as we call it, that's the acronym for it, involves installing all electric appliances like heat water heaters and heat pumps for space heating in place of those that use natural gas. It's kind of that simple. I mean, sort of. So the transition is going to require a lot of things, including changing to our building codes so that this transition that needs to happen happens quicker. It applies to all kinds of buildings, so every building can be electrified. And as we were been saying earlier, just want to clarify it because a lot of people ask us this, is that we're just currently advocating for no new gas hookups. So any buildings built from now on, we're hoping to not have any new hookups for gas lines. So why is it important to electrify our buildings? Well, there's some serious climate benefits and reductions in greenhouse gases by eliminating burning natural gas in buildings and replacing it with that energy from renewable resources. Also, local, regional, and state climate targets cannot be met unless we electrify our buildings, and that's really important. And we're going to talk about the many adverse health effects with indoor air pollution that's generated when using natural gas in buildings, mostly residential, and we'll get more to that in this presentation. There's also there's lower costs associated with operating and also building all electric buildings. Also, all electric appliances are much more efficient than natural gas ones, and again, we'll go into that. And finally, there are some serious public safety risks associated with the extraction, transportation, storage, and delivery of natural gas. A couple examples. We live in earthquake country, so when you have an earthquake, there's a high potential for these gas lines to rupture and have post-earthquake fires, which that has happened in the past. And then I'm not sure if any people are familiar with the Diablo Canyon gas leak, where there's this massive storage facility in Diablo Canyon that was leaking tons and tons and tons of natural gas into the atmosphere. That was really bad for the residents. They had to be evacuated, and also just compounding the the climate change issues with natural gas, the tons and millions of tons going into the atmosphere. So when we don't need natural gas, these sort of things will stop happening. So why is building electrification so much better for San Diego? So I'm not sure if people are aware, but the San Diego Community Choice Energy just went live. And by the spring of 2021, almost every customer will be able to be a part of this community choice aggregation. This will allow all electric buildings to reduce emissions associated with the energy they use. Then the amount of renewables available decreases, these emissions will go down even further. So currently going live, they have about 50% renewable in their portfolio, delivering energy to people's buildings, and the goal to be 100% by 2035. So every percentage going higher in renewables being delivered to homes means that that's the less emissions associated with using appliances in buildings. So there's two pie charts here. On the left-hand side is the emissions by sector in California. Obviously, transportation is one of the biggest ones, but buildings use 25 or contribute 25% of the total emissions in California. And of those, a significant portion are from space heating and water heating. So if you combine those together, just those two together amount to 10% of the emissions from California. So if we went to all electric buildings, we have potentially to be able to reduce as much as 10% from the emissions we do in California. So that's huge. It's a big, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. So there's lots of momentum being happening in the state for building electrification in the last few years, including several assembly bills and state bills. There's 30 and 31 and 32 that are happening. And several are either trying to provide funding and incentives for electrification, also trying to help mandate and encourage the CEC to study emissions reductions associated with building electrification. There's lots of advocacy trying to influence the current building cycle, 2022 building cycle, to make that an all electric code. And then also there's the utilities like the Sacramento SMUD that are really for pro electrification of buildings, and they are promoting their utilities and pilot programs and incentives to electrify buildings. There are currently over 40 municipalities that have already adopted some sort of building electrification code, whether it's an all-out ban or something close to it with a few exceptions. So Berkeley is an example of an all-out ban. So all single-family, high-rise, multifamily, and non-residential are required in new construction to be all electric. Then you've got cities like Brisbane and Burlingame, which are all electric. However, they have some exceptions for cooktops, or if you're life science or restaurants, they have exceptions for those businesses not to be affected at this time. So, but there, like I said, there's over 40 of these. So there's lots of lots of momentum going towards electrification. So now I'm going to expand a little bit on why all electric buildings have lower costs. So first costs for new constructions, buildings can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 less per unit due to not having to install that infrastructure for gas. Operational costs also are considerably lower. For instance, utility bills can be anywhere from $100 to $500 lower when using appliances that use gas. And then this technology is fully mature and ready available. Heat pump systems for both water heating and space heating exist, and they're comparable in cost. And Carl's going to really dive down into that later on, so you can really explain why that is. Again, a little more detail. The reason why new constructions cost is that you don't have to basically install pipes from the main into your building and throughout the building. It just doesn't have to happen, so it's much cheaper. And also, heat pump systems are anywhere from 3 to 5 times more efficient than natural gas appliances. And then when you pair this with rooftop solar and storage, the cost will fall even further because your cost for those electrons are less, and also the emissions are less because those are all coming from renewable sources. Again, we'll elaborate that on more. And then what's going to happen is that as more and more people transition to electrifying their buildings, the infrastructure for gas needs to be maintained and upgraded. And so there'll be fewer and fewer ratepayers that rely on gas. And so their costs are going to go up. So it's definitely behooves the average person to go and electrify soon, because that is a reality that's going to happen. And lastly, California is not quite as green as we think. There's a lot of things that California is leading on. But for example, the state of California continues to issue fracking permits, even though it touts its emission targets and so forth. They're still issuing rebates for gas water heaters, which will not help them reach these targets. So they're kind of fighting each other onto that. And then lastly, like I said, there's lots of advocacy for all electric building codes in the 2000 Title 24 update cycle. However, from what we're hearing, that's probably not going to happen. What we're truly hoping is that they mandate either heat pump water heaters or heat pump for space heating. But we'll wait and see. But there's lots and lots of people trying to make that happen. So because of this, we potentially may not have an all electric building code in 2025, which unfortunately may be too late. So this is why we need to advocate for building electrification at every level now. We can't wait for the state to do the right thing. If we made mandate be here locally and start that transition as soon as possible. So like I showed you, it's already happening. So that's what we're trying to do at the SDVC, is really trying to get the local localities to really consider all electric codes. And there's definitely cities around San Diego County that are doing that. So that's great. So that's what I have for BE. I'm going to now start transitioning into the adverse health effects of indoor air pollution, another really good reason why we need to electrify our buildings. So in the spring of 2020, 2 new reports were released. They are both studies researching the health effects of gas in built spaces. The first report is a meta-study out of UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, and examined both indoor and outdoor air pollution in California caused by residential gas appliances, including furnaces, water heaters, and stoves. The second one was also a study about health and gas, but this time it was more of the focus on cooking. Both those studies provide tangible, shareable information comparable with citations, many of which are hyperlinked from the report. We go into some key takeaways here about the toxins that they tracked and their effect on health. But let's first ask a question. What percentage of households in California have at least one gas appliance? Is it 37? Is it 68? 90%?
68.
90.
It's kind of scary. 90%.
Mm.
Yeah, so that means that California and San Diego have a lot of work ahead of us to decarbonize our homes. So that's phase 2 is what do we do with the existing building stock? So you probably remember being told that natural gas is clean to burn with no emissions to consider. All right, that simply isn't the case, and no one in the industry has ever found that to be true. That's why there's mandatory venting for gas appliances, and it's the norm, it's the law. But vents only work if we use them and operate them. Right? So if we forget to turn them on, those toxins potentially can hurt you. And less than 35% of Californians turn on the ventilation hoods when they operate their stoves. And in some cases, there's no hood present, so that's not even an option. So let's dive deep into those pollutants when we burn gas. So the first one is carbon monoxide. It's one you probably heard about. It's tasteless, it's odorous, it's why it's so dangerous. You don't know it's there. And that's why you should have at least one carbon monoxide detector in your household. The acute health effects from extreme exposure are well understood, including nausea, dizziness, headache, dementia, memory loss, seizure, brain damage, and even death. More likely exposure we see in a household is more chronic or daily or constant exposure. Constant exposure to carbon monoxide has been associated with brain and heart toxicity, heart failure, cardiovascular disease, also low birth weight when pregnant mothers are exposed. Now, it's important to note, we're not saying that everyone who's operating a stove, especially if they're operating it functionally, operating it appropriately with the hood, are going to have this kind of exposure. But the science and these reports expose that these emissions on homes are a much bigger problem than previously understood. The next set we're going to look at are nitrous oxides, or the NOxes, we call them, NO and NO2. Acute exposure includes decreased lung function, asthma exasperation, respiratory infection, and stroke. Chronic, again, means long-term exposure has been associated with premature mortality, lung and breast cancer, coughing, shortness of breath, asthma, wheezing, respiratory illness, especially in children, which is most unfortunate. Again, stressing that these are things the science is showing us can happen to people who are breathing in excessive nitrous oxides, specifically when related to improperly using vented stoves or just not turning them on. Particulate matter is a leading cause of mortality and morbidity in the world. The term PM 2.5 is used to describe very small particles that can hang in the air, so we breathe them in. And acute exposure at 2.5 can result in stroke and increased blood pressure. But chronic exposure can result in premature mortality, bronchitis, heart failure, cardiovascular disease, and low birth weight and preterm birth. Here's why we need to pause and mention that particulate matter can be associated with both the act of cooking. So even if you're cooking on an electric stove, you still can get some PM 2.5, and combustion also adds to that. So it's really important to properly vent when you're cooking on it, even if you're cooking on an electric stove. Particulate matter from gas furnaces and water heaters is much higher than a stove, but they're more likely to be properly ventilated to the outside. But let's not assume the furnace and water heater combustion just vanishes. It goes to the outside, it becomes outdoor air pollution. And finally, we're going to talk about formaldehyde. It's the last pollutant we're going to mention here. It's an important air pollution problem, but we have to stress that with the complete combustion in properly functioning appliances, its presence is pretty much minimized. Formaldehyde is in the household come from a number of other sources, including outside air, but the study include this as a risk, so we're going to talk about it here. In the case of formaldehyde, the dose response effects are nonlinear, so acute exposure may be significantly more dangerous. Formaldehyde's risks are many. Effects of acute exposure include respiratory, eye and skin irritation, sneezing, coughing, nasal congestion, drowsiness, chest tightness, shortness of breath, asthma exacerbation. Chronic effects of long-term formaldehyde exposure include cancer, asthma, bronchitis in children, damage to respiratory systems, headaches, sleep disorders, memory loss, birth defects, low birth weight, and even spontaneous abortion. It's important to note that the association with gas appliances and formaldehyde was the weakest of all the toxins in the report. And one report actually called for, the first one called for more investigation. However, the other report called out specific risks to long durations for in situations where people are simmering things for long periods of time, multiple days a week, which occurs frequently here in our San Diego communities. So I'm going to stop there and let Carl kind of take over with his slides. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let Carl go ahead and do that. There we go.
Thank you. Can you folks see my screen? Someone give me a thumbs up. Meryl? Yes, good. Awesome. Hopefully Robert has scared the poop out of you and everyone will operate your vents, the vent above your gas stove from this point forward. I'm very serious about that. You know, we become comfortable with the fact that we only need to turn it on when it's smoky in the house. That's not true. The combustion from the natural gas on your gas stove is definitely affecting your health. So please take that seriously. That's the number one takeaway that you can have tonight without doing much of anything. Is just make sure you use that vent above your stove. And we hope to inspire you to help us in electrification. Let's talk now about environmental justice. So some communities carry a much heavier burden of pollution and its effects. This is a screen capture of Cal EnviroScreen, which uses a color coding system to spotlight communities with particularly bad health impacts from environmental pressures, such as air pollution, water pollution, toxic releases, and hazardous waste, among other factors. And you can see in the neighborhoods of Sherman Heights, Logan Heights, Barrio Logan, and West National City, they're all clustered together in orange by the Port of San Diego. But other neighborhoods in dark green, just a few miles away, aren't subjected to this pollution. Importantly, there are also racial and income disparities between these impacted neighborhoods and the other neighborhoods. And that correlation isn't accidental. The pollution has been concentrated and the mitigation has been ignored in communities of color by outside forces. In other words, people who knew better have for a very long time put the dirty industry or even our polluting power plants in the neighborhoods of people who were not empowered to push back on that. So while gas combustion in the home isn't the core problem with air quality in all environmental justice neighborhoods, gas in homes piles on top of an already bad situation. So one important step in moving forward with building electrification is to ensure that we address the communities that need to have their air cleaned up the most. And often when we're doing this work, we remind people, those are the folks that should be addressed first. So whether that means that we need to come up with incentive programs or we need to actually come up with subsidies, there's got to be ways to help these communities that really have the worst air quality, not just in San Diego, but we know that San Diego has some of the worst air quality in the country. So there's a lot of work to do. We also have EJ communities in the North County of San Diego, in Oceanside, Vista, San Marcos, and Escondido. We talked earlier about gas cooking and the importance of ventilation. One factor for people who rent apartments or live in smaller living spaces is that the toxins in their homes are more concentrated relative to that smaller living space. So that means that gas combustion toxins in those small spaces are worse for a family's health. I want to talk now about the workforce, because going into this campaign for building electrification, we knew that there would be people's jobs who are affected by this. I work with IBEW and other labor organizations and policy folks in my climate work and my justice work in the county. So full disclosure, I really appreciate that we're all part of this community together. Right, I want you to imagine picking up the newspaper one day, or maybe you're reading the news on a website, and realizing that not only the company that you work for or the plant that you work in, but your whole industry is about to shrink, maybe out of existence. I'm going to read you a quote. "We have the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. It's right there on a fault line. There's a tremendous amount of concern about that. There's no way, with what we know today, that we would build that plant as we built it. And people are rightly concerned about it. You're in a state where you have 3 faults that are well overdue for a major seismic activity, for a major earthquake. So this is an obvious and pointed concern." And that was something that Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom said on March 17th of 2011, just over a month after the Fukushima accident. And
I finally connected to the Zoom meeting.
His words were important.
Yeah.
His words are very important, but they also sent some shock waves around the state, and especially in the small community of San Luis Obispo. If you were one of these workers, and not speaking specifically about those workers, but any workers who are in an industry that's at risk, your first instinct might be to fight to keep that job that you have in that industry. And it's a scenario that many workers face as we transition to a decarbonized society. Taking people into account with a plan for how to address an impacted workforce is also part of a just transition. And much ink has been spilled describing the problem, but there have been very few examples of just how a just transition can be done well. So I want to review one example where displaced workers are being treated with respect and through negotiation, and in an instance where the community created a just transition plan together. So Diablo Canyon is California's last operating nuclear plant. It's still operational today. From 2011 through 2016, following the Fukushima triple meltdown, new attention was placed on the fault lines surrounding this longtime job center in the San Luis Obispo area. PG&E, who owns this plant, or operates it at least, they realized that it wouldn't be prudent to renew their license at a plant with these seismic faults surrounding it. And they also acknowledged that the plant was no longer economically feasible to continue operating it. That's the case with a lot of nuclear power plants around the country. So they began showing signs that they wanted to shutter it. But Diablo Canyon represents a large number of jobs in the surrounding area. It also represents 9% of California's power. That's huge, 9%, one plant. And the business represents a big part of the regional tax base. So closing that plant wasn't going to happen without people feeling major disruption and concern. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW Local 1245, union workers, they resisted the plant's closure. They wanted to keep their jobs, and many of which were very specific to the work that they did, but that wouldn't be available locally if this plant were to shut down. You don't get another job at a nuclear plant in San Luis Obispo when Diablo Canyon shuts down. And in fact, you don't get another job at another nuclear plant anywhere in the state of California, because this is the last one that's operating. So they appealed to state energy regulators. They appealed to the public, and they appealed to state legislators. And this is a photo of the IBEW members and supporters who traveled from San Luis Obispo up to Sacramento to plead their point. Friends of the Earth and Mothers for Peace, both of which had fought the nuclear power plant for decades, showed up in force to help make sure the closure finally happened. Friends of the Earth, which is now an international organization, was founded on the campaign to block Diablo Canyon. So this was not just another environmental issue for them. This was the issue that got them started in the first place. But PG&E, environmental groups, labor, and other local area stakeholders all worked to come up with a transition plan, including funds to help buffer the projected economic losses that the community would suffer from a shift in the tax base. In June of 2016, they announced that they had negotiated an agreement to shut down by 2025 with plans to help workers with an additional 25% retention bonus to prepare for job loss. So for some older workers, it would give them a path to wind down their careers. You know, they could buffer some of that extra cash during the remaining years and hopefully prepare for retirement. For the younger workers, it gave them some time and resources to seek additional training and prepare for the next stage in their careers. Many workers now plan to use those skills, those new skills, to be part of the team who will spend years safely decommissioning and deconstructing the plant. As we know with the plant here in San Diego, San Onofre, it's like a 14-year plan plus. It takes forever to decommission these things. It becomes half of someone's career just doing that work. Also part of the deal was a plan to replace Diablo Canyon with 100% renewable energy, which by 2016 had become a very critical goal among the environmental community and is a necessary target for PG&E, who have ever-growing minimum renewable energy commitments that they must adhere to. There's a footnote here to this story. In 2018, the CPUC tried to slash the workers' retention bonus from 25% down to 15% and undo some of the other tenets that the joint proposal agreement had made. The IBEW was forced to lobby state legislators to restore the agreement with Senate Bill 1090. And in the end, this is an important story of the community working together to find common ground and respect each other. But I want to point out that it's also a reminder of the importance of organized labor to help ensure workers' rights and protections. It's really easy for us to look at things from the perspective of an environmental group, to say those workers have to stand down because they're hurting our environment. But it's also really important to think of things from their perspective and know that we have to keep those people whole and make sure that they have a future so that they're not our lead opposition to something that we know needs to change. Another footnote, this one's more recent. PG&E has not yet followed through with plans to replace the 9% of California energy lost by the decommissioning of Diablo Canyon with fully renewable replacement energy. So recently, the Union of Concerned Scientists in a special report warned that unless someone intervenes, emissions may go up because of this. Sierra Club and the Center for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Technologies warned in a recent op-ed that because gas power plants operate in communities of color, those EJ communities may once again be impacted the most. So again, this is about acknowledging and recognizing the problems we have with our system and being really thoughtful for how our solutions play out. All right, let's switch gears. I told you I would get nerdy and technical at the back end of this. And I think it's a fun thing to try to do to get people excited about where we're going with this technology. And I want to talk first about something that we don't always cover when we're talking about decarbonization, but it's a key part. It's called efficiency. And efficiency can be defined as producing desired results with little or no waste. That's a textbook definition. A little quote here. President Carter told us in 1977 in an address that he made from the White House on TV, we must face the fact that the energy shortage is permanent. There is no way we can solve it quickly, but if we all cooperate and make modest sacrifices, if we learn to live thriftily and remember the importance of helping our neighbors, then we can find ways to adjust and to make our society more efficient and our own lives more enjoyable and productive, end quote. So that was also the moment when he asked people in the USA to put on a sweater. A lot of you remember that moment. And for years, Jimmy Carter's been ridiculed for telling people to put on a sweater. But when we face a climate crisis, we all need to be prepared to put on a sweater. We all need to be prepared for some sacrifice. So back to efficiency. Engineers and scientists actually have a formula for efficiency. It looks like this. Efficiency equals power out divided by power in. This means efficiency isn't just a hand-waving fuzzy term. You can actually compute it. We usually multiply it by 100, and we pop a percent at the end to make it roll off the tongue easier and let people know that you've ended your sentence. You see, efficiency gets no units. It's not 89 watts or 89 amps or 89 volts. And I should point out that efficiency can also represent energy out over energy in or work out over work in. Basically, it's a formula and a term that quantifies a lack of waste. So we just described something as 89% efficient, for example. And that last 11% that would take us up to 100, that's lost to waste. And I'll say it here and now so that I can make myself a liar in a couple of slides. You cannot exceed 100% efficiency. 100% efficiency means that you have no waste or losses, a perfect machine, but you can't exceed it. 100% is the best you could do. So why do we care about efficiency? Because using fossil fuels has gotten us into a bad place, yet our society has become very dependent on powered things, often to keep us warm or help cook our food. And as we decarbonize and use electricity for all of our heating and cooking, for example, it's important that we don't get lazy and waste electricity unnecessarily. Our challenge to power everything with renewable energy is huge, but necessary. And by asking everyone to electrify, it's our responsibility never to lose sight of efficiency. Before we go on to the next slide, I want to remind myself and my friends that know me from this community, I've gotten really into cycling and e-bikes and active transportation, and efficiency is key among all things that we're doing in adapting to climate crisis. So remember that if you're shopping for an electric car, find the most efficient one. It's important. All right, moving on. Types of waste energy. There are 3 types of waste energy that diminish efficiency, but only one you've probably really noticed. Friction or excessive combustion with the associated exhaust, or places where those are places where we see waste heat. I only mention light and sound here to be thorough. It's not likely that you'll really be noticing light as an ejection of waste energy. And Jose Bueno Torres is here with us tonight. He could probably give me some examples where light is an important impact on something in a system. But I can give you an example of a noisy machine that's giving up some amount of energy to produce those sound waves. All other things being equal, a quieter machine is often more efficient than a very noisy machine. Here's my example. Those deafening Vitamix blenders at Jamba Juice that were so loud that they had to build sound chambers for them. And they still cause hearing loss in a generation of Jamba workers. That's waste energy. You know, when it's making this tremendous amount of noise, it's putting off a lot of energy to create that noise, and it's not putting it into grinding up your smoothie. All right, let's dive into water heaters. Traditionally, electric water heaters use a pair of resistive heat coils to heat the water. With the old standard called energy factor, you could effectively understand this type of water heater to be 90 to 95% efficient. Most of the energy went right into heating the water, and very little of it was lost to the ambient space around the water heater. If you throw an insulating jacket on it, you could increase the efficiency even more. But try as you might, you can't exceed an energy factor of 1 or 100% efficiency for this type of water heating. Remember, that's a rule. No exceeding 100% efficiency. But some rules were meant to be broken. Enter the heat pump electric water heater, or more accurately, the hybrid heat pump water heater. On top of this rebellious machine, there sits a miniature compressor, and the system also has an evaporator and a condenser. The trick here is that it takes the ambient heat present in the air, and through a process of controlled compression and expansion of the refrigerant, it's able to transfer heat into the water at 3 to 4 times the efficiency of a standard electric water heater. This is game changing. Not only does it require, but it does require some air to exchange to keep finding residual heat in the air. It blows out cool air as if it was a standing air conditioner, redirecting that heat it extracted into the water tank. Now, if I say 370% efficiency in a heat pump water heater, that's technically against the law of physics, but that's not really what's happening here. Instead, it's cheating because you're borrowing heat from energy from a different system, the surrounding air. Even on a cold, chilly day, it works. There is always heat energy in the air everywhere, except the cold void of space. All right, moving on to a ducted air conditioner. To discuss air-space heat pumps, it helps us start with the familiar. A central air ducted air conditioning system has 2 big parts, the compressor condenser and the air handler evaporator that will typically go in the attic space along with the ducting. The compressor condenser is that thing that you see outside that can make noise, a lot of noise, when it fires up. And it's not actually sucking and blowing air from the inside of your house. It's only sucking air on the outside across the radiator fins in the unit that you see here with these 2 dogs getting a hairdryer job. The heat exchange actually happens with copper tubing refrigerant lines that extend inside to the air handler. This diagram shows the different parts of an air conditioning system. Just remember that this is the same principle for a refrigerator, a freezer, an air conditioner, and for various heat pumps. The machine just moves heat from one place to another. And when I say heat pump, this thing doubles as your air conditioner. You don't need both because the heat pump literally is both. It's a twofer. pretty much the only thing that differentiates a heat pump from a single purpose air conditioner is that there's a reversing switch that sends the pressurized refrigerant in the other direction. So this is why there isn't that much difference in price between a large traditional ducted air conditioning unit and then using a heat pump instead. Most times you can't tell the difference when you're standing next to one. Now I need to tell you what is crude and old tech about the traditional ACs or the heat pumps that we see along the side of most of the houses around here. It is sized for the worst case scenario, hot or cold, and it runs at 100% when it switches on. The AC compressor motor runs at a single speed, and it's determined by the 60 hertz waveform that we have from the grid's AC current. That results in an oversized energy hog that uses excessive energy to start up and blows as cold as it possibly can or as hot as it possibly can every time it switches on. It's the equivalent of having a car with an oversized V8 engine, and all you have is an ignition switch for your speed control. There's no foot pedal, there's no throttle. It's just on or it's off. And when it's on, man, it's on, 100 miles per hour. So dual speed compressors are a good improvement over a single speed. They help a little bit, but it's still a bit of a half measure compared to what I'm going to cover next. All right, now enter something called the mini split. This technology is used worldwide, and it has been for decades. So even though it may look foreign to you, and you may have only seen a few of them in your lifetime and wondered, why does that one look different? Please rest assured, this is the technology everyone outside the United States is using. It uses all the same principles of the heat pump that we saw earlier. And it's reversible and exchanges refrigerant via copper lines. But the real tech jump here is something that we notice when we look at the size of the outdoor unit. See how thin it is? And it's hugging up against the wall. It's looking like a vertical pizza box kind of shape instead of that hulking thing that we saw on the earlier slide. See how big that guy is? And this one's slim. There's a reason for that. Also, it runs really quietly. The reason for that is the compressor that's inside and actually the way that these things function. So they make use of a scroll compressor that you can see here in this animation. It's a smaller, longer running setup. And it can also run at different capacity to adapt to the current needs. So it uses inverters to run the AC compressor motor at infinitely varying speeds to change capacity, or some of the other designs use what's known as a digital scroll compressor, which operates at a single speed, but it uses a solenoid mechanism to pull one section away from the other. And so it will basically disengage the compressor. So over a 20-second period, it might be engaged for 5 seconds and then off for 15 seconds. Okay, so that would be using it at 20%, 25% capacity. And then maybe when you first powered it on in the morning and you really needed that heat fast, it might work all 20 seconds continuously. The variable capacity, these additional control methods, which are like a precise throttle pedal, to return to that analogy that I had of driving a car, that gives the modern scroll compressor versatility and allows a much smaller motor to run continuously, but using much, much less power over a longer time. So this type of heat pump doesn't switch on with the ground shaking force of a jet engine, which, by the way, is the period of time when a traditional AC or a heat pump that's single speed, they really use excessive power when they first turn on. So the idea that they cycle on for 10 minutes and then off for 10 minutes and then back on for 10 minutes with the traditional ones, that's really part of your efficiency loss. So the fans for both the indoor and the outdoor parts of a split system are usually DC fans, and they can run at different speeds. So if this thing's at full clip because you need the most out of it, it'll really churn those fans up. But once it reaches a steady state and you've got your space conditioned to where you want it, it will continue to run with slower fan speeds and thus also lower power needs. Another change with the so-called split system is that the indoor air handler doesn't rely on any ducting. So instead, the air exchange happens in the room that's being affected. So why is that important? Well, it's important because the ducting is a major efficiency loss in a traditional house system, sometimes costing up to 30% of efficiency loss in the most extreme conditions. So on a really, really hot day or a really, really cold day in a cold climate, all that ducting where your air is leaving the room, going back into the return, getting back to that air handler, and then heading back to you with what is either supposed to be the hot or the cold air, it's all being affected by your attic's temperature, which generally is not conditioned the same way that the rest of your home is. Right, for larger homes, what I showed you here, this is called a mini split because when you purchase something like this, it will work well for a bungalow or a cottage because you get one outdoor unit and you get one indoor unit. But for a larger home, that's not appropriate. You don't want to, it's like heating an entire large house from a fireplace or a wood stove. It's very challenging. You end up spending all your time huddled up close to that stove if you live in a cold climate. But for larger homes with a heat pump, the solution is called a multi-split. And what you have there is you still have a unit that's outside, and it may be a double-sized unit, or they may be even two for a very large home. But then inside you have multiple air handlers, and the copper piping moves around all throughout the house. And oftentimes it'll go to a distribution bank where it'll direct the flow just to the room that you're operating. And you can see in this image here, that room in the lower right-hand corner says off. They've decided to just let that room go without any conditioning at all because they're not in there right now. That's a dining room. They save that room for, when they're doing puzzles or holiday parties or when they're entertaining guests. So there's really no room or no reason to condition that room. On the other hand, there might be rooms that you are in that you do want to condition, and you may want to have them at different temperatures. Well, with a multi-split system, you can do that. People can choose the temperatures they want. There's even really weird situations where you may have strong sun on one side of a house, bearing in a window where you really just can't control it for some reason. And then another part of the house where it's actually cold. And these multi-splits are sophisticated enough that they could move the heat from one part of the house to the other part of the house. That's how they can, manipulate that heat through the distribution system. Right, the indoor air handlers for split heat pumps can be hung on the wall for easier retrofitting. You saw that earlier. It looks like a kind of a 3.5 foot, 4 foot long tank sitting on the wall. It's not a tank at all, but it kind of looks like that. And that's got all of the evaporator coil in there. It can work as an evaporator or a condenser, depending on which direction you're moving the heat. And it's got electronics and it's got a fan. And it does a good job of oscillating back and forth and distributing the stuff around the room. But some people are not that enamored with that idea, having this big clunky thing sticking on the wall. Again, it's really good for retrofitting because if you have that existing space already, you can just bore a hole through the wall, run your copper tubing, and then hang this thing on the wall, and you can mount it pretty easily. There's not a lot of disturbance up in your attic and redoing ducting and all that. But there's another design called the cassette, and I'm going to show you a video of what it looks like when you have kind of a world-class cassette that's capable of really understanding and respecting what you're trying to do in the home. This is pretty high-tech stuff, but it's not unbelievably high-tech. This isn't just for the richest of the rich. This is something that we could put in new construction and would have real good implications on efficiency.
Mitsubishi Electric Cooling and Heating, leaders in advanced cooling and heating technology, introduce our improved 3D IC sensor. As part of our new PLFY and PLA ceiling recessed indoor units, the 3D IC sensor is a small but remarkable complement to Mitsubishi Electric's cooling and heating technology. Mounted to the exterior panel of the ceiling recessed indoor units, the 3D IC sensor thermally scans the interior space in a circular motion, continuously analyzing the temperature profile of a room to detect cool and warm spots. To achieve this, the 3D IC sensor performs 232 circular scans with 8 points per scan to measure 1,856 zones within a given space. The sensor then detects heat signatures based upon size, temperature, and movement to capture an exceptionally accurate thermal profile of the room. By creating a 3D thermal profile, the 3D IC sensor can even determine when a space is occupied or completely empty. When the space is occupied, the 3D IC sensor identifies the heat signatures and directs the indoor unit to apply cool or warm air as needed. This feature may also be customized to direct the unit to deliver cool or warm air towards the heat signature or away from it, ensuring maximum personalized comfort. When the room is empty, the 3D IC sensor will automatically adjust the temperature levels by switching to an energy saving mode based upon user-selected options. Mitsubishi.
So you can imagine how much different that could make if all the rooms in our new buildings or our new homes, think of a school, for example, a school classroom, we're asked to put stickers on the light switches to say, remind students and teachers, turn the lights off, right? That's a really good reminder, especially for young people that are still learning about conserving electricity. But imagine if the HVAC systems in all of our rooms were aware whether there's somebody in the room, and it directed the HVAC to the person in the room. And when the person left the room, it stops doing that. Imagine how much energy we could save if we really paid attention using some better technologies, using the heat pumps that I described here tonight. We could really be looking forward to nice automation that I don't think is too over the top, but that also really respects our limited amount of renewable energy and makes sure that we don't waste any of it. All right, so I want to remind everyone to please check out the San Diego Building Electrification Coalition website, sdbec.org. That's an important place for you to go to sign a petition. If you got lit up tonight and you really want to help, you can sign our petition there. If you're part of an organization, I encourage you to reach out to us, especially if you're interested in having your organization join the coalition. As Robert said earlier, we are trying to build a large establishment of both environmental, but also justice organizations. So please let us know if you're one of those things. Maybe you're part of a labor union, maybe you're part of some other organization that's out there trying to do good work. We want your voice along with ours if this is something that you believe is important. So I'd like to do some Q&A now. I'm sorry I've been rambling so long. I appreciate everyone being so attentive. I think that Robert and Meryl have been doing a good job here queuing us up with lots of different questions. Let me just get a gut check. Is my mic still on? Everybody hearing me? Everybody still with me? Good. Okay. I got sent in a question actually from a fellow named John. He sent two questions. I'm going to ask one of his questions first, and we'll go through some other things, and then we may get to his second question after that. John asked, along with the elimination of gas to rental units, how will the metering be implemented for common uses like heating, hot water, and related? Rental units do not usually have meters for such energy uses, nor do they get a statement for that portion of the common area energy usage. So I think that's a reasonable question. And I think what John's really getting at is, in the case of a retrofit, if you had a multifamily apartment dwelling, for example, and maybe it did have separate gas meters for the folks using their heaters or their hot water heaters, but it doesn't have necessarily separate metering for electricity at that time. And I guess the answer would be, if we can do independent metering for gas, we can certainly do it for electric. And retrofitting in most cases will still require some rewiring of the buildings to get those higher 220 volt outlets out to those spaces. So at that time, that would probably be the appropriate time to go back and put individual metering if that was the case. And I know there's some apartment buildings where all utilities are included. So there's really wouldn't be that big of a difference to go from gas to electric. You're still talking about included utilities. So I guess there's lots of ways to look at that. I wanted to mention something that Eve pointed out. She mentioned the tankless electric water heater. And I know I heard Dr. Carr talk about that last year. So all the research that I've done about what's the best water heater to get and to focus on, I have to really tell you that the electric tankless is not the way to go. Of course, there may be cases where people are just convinced that that's the absolute best way to go. But remembering what I said before about 370% efficiency on a heat pump tank water heater, you really put yourself in a much better position to make the most use of the limited electricity that we have to heat your hot water. But it does require a tank for a heat pump because it heats very slowly over time. If you take a number of showers all in the morning, for example, and you deplete that water tank from its hot water, it will cycle for a couple of hours using very low energy draw, but it will work for a long time to reheat that water. So you really can't do heat pump and instantaneous water heating at the same time. On the other hand, an electric tankless water heater, if you go to install one of those, that is the number one thing that will trigger a total panel upgrade, and probably trenching, and probably your neighbor's lights will all dim when a thing fires up, because those are the most electricity hog appliance that money can buy, only because you're trying to do a lot in a very short amount of time to heat that hot water. So they're really not the best way to go. And obviously we want you to stay away from trying to use gas tankless water heaters because we're trying to get rid of all the combustion. Joe asked the question, Scientific American this month has an article proposing replacing natural gas with hydrogen gas, possibly with ammonia or methane, to eliminate CO2 emissions and preserve the $3 trillion US infrastructure investments made to date. This switch could presumably preserve jobs and satisfy union concerns. What do you think of this idea? So Joe, this is actually something that our UA organizer, UA 230 here, mentioned at a seminar or meeting last month. And I wasn't there to kind of counter that argument, nor was it really the appropriate time, because we do want to hear what folks in the trades think are reasonable solutions, and we don't necessarily want to shout them down that, no, that's not a reasonable solution. But I do have an opinion on this, and that is that right now, what we're seeing is the gas infrastructure companies are really flailing. They see the writing is on the wall, that electrification is coming. And so they are struggling for ideas for how they could remain relevant. And one of those ways that they remain relevant is to still sell you something down those pipes, something that they think if you won't accept fracked natural gas, maybe you'll accept something else coming down your pipes. But the truth is, it's not safe to burn hydrogen as a substitution for natural gas in any of our appliances. It just doesn't work as is. Now, you could design new appliances that would be capable of doing that. But the problem is when you burn with a low dollar appliance, I'm talking like a several $100 appliance, or like a range that looks like a gas range, but that was actually meant to burn hydrogen, you still end up with NOx. So the chemical reaction, it has to combine with the other stuff in the air as you burn it. And when you burn hydrogen in the built space, you're still going to create NOx. And as we saw earlier, NOx is not something that we want in our built spaces. So what we're really seeing here is kind of a pivot that the gas companies are trying to do with, well, what if, can we come up with this gas solution? Now, hydrogen as a transportation solution is a little different, because in that case, they're not talking about combusting hydrogen at the end. what they're offering to do is take hydrogen and use it through a fuel cell. And in that scenario, I believe your byproducts don't include excessive NOx. I could be wrong, but anyway, that's sort of the chemistry there. So the short answer is, when you see someone describing that we can switch to biogases or there's something else we can put down those pipes, I swear it'll be okay. I want you to be very cautious and suspicious about that, because all combustion is going to cause more CO2 in the atmosphere, even if they're claiming that it's CO2 neutral because maybe it's from a bio source. I can tell you very few people have really proven that you can come up with good renewable bioenergy. It's very hard to do, because in the end, they end up using fossil fuels to farm their biofuels. And when you do all the calculations, it's very tough to do. You could do it, and we may end up doing that someday, but it's not really happening right now.
Carl, could I add something else on that?
Yes, absolutely.
The other issue with substituting hydrogen in the existing natural gas system is that hydrogen, being such a small molecule, leaks more easily, and also actually penetrates metals and embrittles them. So the whole system would have to be tested, and every valve might have to be replaced, and the system would have to be tested for hydrogen embrittlement. And the bigger pipes that lead to power plants and factories can be tested and even relined from the inside by running machines called pigs through them. But the small lines that run to residential buildings can't feasibly be either tested or relined in that way. So it's conceivable that in some future time, when, say, green hydrogen made by electrolysis with surplus solar power is a thing, factories or power plants might be use green hydrogen, because the large diameter natural gas pipes have been repurposed for hydrogen. But it's really hard to imagine that the millions of miles of smaller and smaller pipes that lead into residential buildings could be safely repurposed to carry pure hydrogen, because they couldn't be validated for that purpose, since they weren't designed to carry hydrogen originally. So I think it's really a case of greenwashing, trying to preserve to make a reason why we shouldn't go to electric appliances. Because the other thing, as you said, if we're going to go to 100% hydrogen, all the appliances have to be replaced. So that begs the issue: if you're going to replace the appliances, why aren't you replacing electric appliances? So,
yeah, thank you, Jose. And again, pointing back to efficiency, we know that you can get maximum efficiency with a lot of these things that I covered earlier today. But combustion is a place where efficiency drops off the map into the abyss. It's very difficult to work with combustion and have tremendous efficiency. So especially at the local level, it'll be difficult.
Yeah, if you picture hydrogen economy where we're collecting solar power, we're using it to make hydrogen, well, you lose about 25% when you do that. Then we're going to move this hydrogen through pipelines, then we're going to burn it. Well, as you said, you never get more than 100% efficiency in any device that burns it, whereas an electric heat pump has an effective efficiency of 300%. So if you're going to collect solar power, you're better off just sending it to people and having them use it in heat pump devices than making it into hydrogen, sending them hydrogen and having them combust the hydrogen. So I just don't think that hydrogen in residential use is a viable solution. There are processes that by their nature need either very high heat or need hydrogen because it's part of the chemical reaction. Steel making is an example of that. And there will be a use for green hydrogen in industrial processes, but it doesn't seem to me that it's a solution in residential replacement of methane. So.
Thanks, Jose. So I want to move on to another question. This was something that Russ sort of postulated in the chat. He said, I remember years ago, the story was that natural gas ovens, stoves, clothes dryers, and water heaters were sold as more efficient than electric. What changed on the efficiency argument? Well, Russ, I think that what we really remember is that people describe those maybe as being more cost effective a long time ago. And then in the shorter time, there was a time not in the not so long distant past where California was describing natural gas as a solution to climate crisis. They were saying that in reference to, as compared to using coal, that burning natural gas would be better than burning coal. There was mostly truth to that, but that was before they factored in the fact that we're using fracking now to acquire our natural gas. And once you have leaks in that fracking process, both when they're drilling the well, while they're producing the well, and then in the transmission of the natural gas back out to where you are, there's a significant amount of fugitive escape of the methane, which is tremendously bad for greenhouse gas, your greenhouse gas warming potential. So I think the short answer is they kind of gaslighted us there. The natural gas was never the right solution. It's never been the better emissions solution either. But along the way, you had industry players that wanted to pump up their thing that they had to offer in extraction. And a lot of folks bought into it. And it's unfortunate because when I do this work with folks around the country too, and somebody pointed out in a webinar the other day that most of the South has started to really build with all electric homes for a long time now. Heat pumps are the norm. I should point out, you guys saw what happened in Texas. And a lot of people got freaked out that heat pumps don't work in extreme cold. Look at what happened in Texas. But I want to point out to you that those heat pumps that were having trouble in Texas, when you have a total power outage, it's true, your electric appliances are not going to work. There's something else you should know. When you have a total power outage, your gas appliances also don't work. Almost all of them are fully controlled and triggered with electricity. So you're left back to a wood burning stove is something that's safe in a total electric power outage. Or we need to get much more resilient with our power for sure. I think that's the better solution than trying to think of in terms of going back to combustion. But what we saw with those heat pumps in Texas was something that I experienced as a college student, and that was the old style of heat pumps that look very much like the giant-sized air conditioners that we see alongside of most houses here in Southern California. Those old style heat pumps were not tremendously efficient. And because of that, they also didn't work very well in cold temperatures. So we saw them getting installed all throughout the South. But as they started to try to install them up into the mid-Atlantic, right? So I lived in Delaware and we had one installed there in a rental that I was in. And December came around and it got cold enough that our heat pump fell back onto a radiant heater strip that was in the basement of the unit. And that thing cost us $700 in a single month for our power bill, which you can imagine was a lot for a bunch of college students that were expecting a bill more along the lines of $30 or $50. So that old idea of using the heat strips as a backup, as a secondary for a heat pump, that's pretty much gone away when you move over to the split heat pumps. They all have defrosting systems on them so they can heat themselves to get the snow and the frost and the ice off of them. And then they work slow and steady and continuous, and they can extract heat even in -0 temperatures. So they do the job, but we have to stick with the very efficient ones. We can't use the kind of half-measured heat pumps. Eve asked the question, does induction oven need similar venting to gas? So that's a good question, Eve. When I was doing this research and reading through those two reports, which I highly recommend, they're in the chat. The one is talking about RMI Health and the other is UCLA Health. If you look back in the chat, you'll see those. They did describe that PM 2.5, the small particulate matter, that some of that comes from the cooking that you're doing. So for example, if you're cooking with oils and you get smoke maybe that you can't see, but it's there in the air, that's still not healthy for you to breathe. And so you should always use a vent when you're cooking. But that said, if you're cooking and it's something that's not giving off that small particulate matter, the electric stoves, induction or just a traditional electric stove, they don't give off any emissions that would require you to use the vent. So the answer is kind of tricky. You really should use the vent no matter what to be the safest, because you are always giving off a little bit of that PM 2.5. Oh, Robert asked the question, Barbara asked the question, where are the North County data, the Just Transition Environmental Justice slide? I don't know if you saw that I did switch from the Lower San Diego up to the North County one. And the EnviroScreen has been updated. In February, they updated it to the EnviroScreen 4.0. That's a free service that you can go and look at. It's a little bit complex to learn and truly understand. And using just the heat map is not really as an effective way as, taking some training on how EnviroScreen works. But you can use that all over the state of California. And they did just update it. So the EnviroScreen 4.0 might have even better data. I used screen caps from EnviroScreen 3.0. Robert asks, what are the ratings derived from the pollution data? So that's also an important one. The heat map is a combination of a ton of different factors. And you could inadvertently assume that it's just air quality, but it's not. So there could be a situation where a place is really close to a landfill or an industrial space that had emitted heavy metals for years. And that would be enough to set it into a hot spot for some place that's really bad for the environment, for people. It also includes some other socioeconomic factors. So it's not just air quality, it's not just water quality. It includes things like statistics on asthma. And so it tries to both look at the observable things in the air, the land, and the water, but then it also looks at the people and how they have been affected over time. And so there's a little bit of a feedback loop there. It's looking at the people and the environment. Okay, Stefan asked 3 different questions here. Let me see. Is there a larger than 5-ton heat pump available for residential? I don't know that. I'm not a real specialist on this. Robert, do you have any idea where these things max out?
No, I don't. I mean, I know there's bigger machines, but they're for commercial use, rooftop units. But those aren't efficient for homes, obviously.
So what I've generally seen, because I've done a little bit of this research to try to figure out, what does it take to convert a home? And what I'm seeing is that you go from a mini split to a multi-split. So maybe the outside unit starts to get upsized a little bit. And then you look at an even bigger unit they're still rating these things in BTUs, British thermal units. You'll see that it's a stacked unit. So there's what looks like one unit right on top of the other unit. But the bigger your space gets, the more you just break this up into multiple outdoor units and multiple indoor units. So I don't think there's any limit on what you could do. I don't think it makes sense to put all your eggs in one basket either, with a giant compressor that when that fails, you have no heating or air conditioning in the entire space. If you have to invest a ton in this thing, the better solution is to have multiple units and break that up into different sections of the house. And in fact, as I've been thinking through this, I've been wondering myself whether we should break the different rooms in our house, if we do need 2 units, and sort of interleave them so that if one fails, we may still have a good chance of keeping the heating and cooling in the plurality of the house going, as opposed to just having one section that's completely blacked out. Stefan also asked, what volts or amps do I need for an electric water heater? That's a good question. So traditionally what we've seen is that even though these heat pump water heaters are using much less power, they also are still hybrids. And so they still have electric probes inside them to work in a traditional sense and be radiant heat. They do that so that they can do well on these cycles that test like, well, what if I'm really taxing this thing and I'm going shower after shower, I'm filling up a jacuzzi sized bathtub. What happens then? Well, in some cases you can switch the thing into an eco mode and it prevents it from turning on that radiant heat. If you're an eco miser like me and you want to really make sure that you don't waste any energy, you turn those probes off. And on some units you can do that easily, others you can't. But because of that hybrid nature, most of the heat pump water heaters that are being sold today, they all have a tank. They're mostly all 220, and some of them are, I guess, around 20 amps and 30 amps. But what we're seeing now is that the manufacturers are responding to the fact that to retrofit these into homes is a challenge, and they don't want people to have to do panel upgrades if they don't absolutely need to. So they are starting to come out. Rheem's coming out with one this summer that is a 120 volt, but still I think a 20 amp circuit. So you may still have to have an electrician come out and run a little higher, gauge wiring out to that outlet. But it probably means that you don't have to, tear down your complete panel and say, oh, I had no room for a whole nother 220 circuit. It's getting easier, let me put it that way, to use heat pump water heaters in challenging situations. We're not completely there yet. In most cases, the easiest thing to do is just get like a 30 amp 220 circuit put in for the heat pump water heater. And the car charging, I'm not really an expert on that. Meryl, do you know the right way to size up for a car charger?
Give me more specifics about the question.
So it's usually 220 volt, but I don't know how many amps. And I think it probably would depend on whether you've got a car with a good charging system on it that could be charged very fast. One thing I will say is, as cars have gotten more and more range and they have larger and larger batteries, they are putting larger capacity chargers on them. And those do require a heavier duty charger to make the most of that recharge system.
Right. So our first electric vehicle was a 2011 Nissan Leaf. And the charger that was actually given to us by the state of California in exchange for compiling data on our EV charging was a 30 amp charger, which basically ran off of it was a 30 amp wall connector. The charger, of course, is always in the electric vehicle itself. And that ran off of a 40 amp breaker. Our most recent electric vehicle prior to our acquisition of a Tesla Model Y recently was a 2019 Chevy Bolt, and that used a 40 amp wall connector coupled to a 50 amp breaker. And we just are now in the process of acquiring a Generation 3 Tesla charger, which uses a 60 amp breaker and a 48 amp charging platform via their wall connector. Does that help?
Okay, let's move on to a little bit less nerdy questions. And I do appreciate the nerdy questions, but I know sometimes that can turn people off that are not really trying to design these systems. Marion asked a really good question. Will SDBEC offer help and resources for homeowners who want to electrify their current homes? So Marion, that's a great question. Right now we have a tech and training working group in the SDBEC. We have a really good resource there, Doug Cott, who's currently doing that type of work with Peninsula Energy up in Northern California. And he's agreed to help do that here in Southern California and in San Diego. So the answer is yes. And we do have that currently at the SDBEC. I will say that, Doug's doing that out of the kindness of his heart. So please don't rely on him to be your home designer, but he's a really good guy, and he will definitely give you as much advice as he can, with some limited effort. But like all people in his situation, he's a professional that usually gets paid for that advice. So don't lean too heavily on him, but he can definitely steer you in the right direction for how to get more information as well if you can't answer the question pretty easily. And frankly, he'll go out of his way because he really likes this stuff and he really wants to help people out.
Carl, I can add that the website, if you go to the resources drop down menu, there's tons, and there's one specifically for homeowner resources. I also know we're trying to compile a list of contractors that actually do this work. I think it's not on the website just yet, but that is something we know we need to be working on, and that's a goal we're going to have. So hopefully, sometime soon, we'll have a good list of contractors that can, install these heat pump water heaters and these heat pump systems for you.
So Eric asked the question, is it really true that operating cost of electricity is less than natural gas? What rates per kilowatt hour and per BTU is this claim based on? So Eric, I appreciate that question, and I don't ever like to misrepresent what the situation here is in San Diego. So I told you guys I started doing this building electrification work in April of last year. And one of the things I heard early on from my boss, Richard at Sierra Club, is that it has been challenging in the past because our electricity rates are very high here in San Diego. SDG&E has not been helpful in that respect. Our rates are some of the highest in the country. They're the highest in California. And it makes it difficult to convince people that electrifying is the way to go. That's why I spent so much time on the efficiency part at the tail end of this presentation, because I want people to understand that it's true. If you try to find the least expensive appliances that you can get at the appliance warehouse, right, you will end up operating very inefficient electrical devices. And given that, plus our high cost of electricity here in San Diego, you could be in a situation where you're looking back going, I think I was paying less with gas. But you may still also want to consider that sometimes there's more important things than getting your lowest utility bill possible. So I do want everyone to kind of be looking forward to where's that time and that opportunity where I can replace that gas appliance with something electric. And I want everyone to consider doing your homework. I did that for our heat pump water heater for a year before we needed one. I was doing my homework and learning about them and preparing my wife for the idea that, when we do this, it's going to cost some money because we're going to have to do some work on the house to get there. And two of us did it together. I'm not proud to say it took us like 30 days because we had water damage from when our water heater gave out. So we had to do plaster, drywall repair. And then the water heater that I purchased was a DOA model, so I had to install it twice. So we went through a lot of work trying to do our own installation. That's not typical. If you pay a professional to do this, they'll be in and out fast. But if they have to rewire your home to get you electricity to that new electric heat pump, for example, water heater, you'll want to have done your homework ahead of time. You want to have understood what's that going to cost to get that extra outlet put in. And I know people that have done that ahead of time too. They say, well, I had the electrician out for something else. And I said, why don't I get that outlet put in? Leslie's waving her hand. She thought ahead, and got that electrician when he was out to do the job. Oftentimes that's what it's about. Electricians' time is a lot. And so if they're out there for some other job, if you can be looking ahead and saying, well, I want an electric dryer. We didn't talk about electric dryers tonight. They're also pretty much an electricity hog. The best solution is to hang your clothes for sure. No two ways about it. Hanging your laundry is the best solution. But we know that's not always practical for everything in your home. You may still need a dryer. And in that situation, there are heat pump dryers. There are condensing dryers. The heat pump dryer is the best way to go. But you'll have to look long and hard to find one right now. The reason why heat pump dryers are good is what they do is they recirculate that heat. They don't let any of it escape the system. So they're working to get the water, the condensation out of the clothes, but they keep the heat that starts in the system and they keep it in the system. So there's no exhaust vent on a heat pump dryer. And because it works that way, it's that much more efficient. Also not your best bang for your buck because the dryer is generally not your big monster in the house. It's your heat pump water heater is the number one thing, and then your air space heating is the second thing. Those are the two biggest uses of gas in your system. Okay, Harry asked, are there any building automation EMS technologies being considered as part of the electrification programs? That's a good question, Harry. One of the things that we're maybe not doing the best at, because we're not doing this as all hands on deck, climate emergency, let's get the government involved and set standards early on, and we're still letting the market kind of decide how we go forward, is that things like an electric heat pump water heater right now, almost all of them have a brain. They're computerized. They have a digital readout, and there's some electronics in there. The one that I bought from A.O. Smith has an option to upgrade it with a small wireless panel so that you can nerd out and control it with your phone and watch all your data. But just as important, the fact that if you can hook it up to a wireless system and you can get that hooked to the internet, then we could also do some load changing. So we could tell from the power company if we wanted to orchestrate this and we cared enough to do it. And we could do it with our CCAs too. The power company could send a signal out to you if you've agreed to be part of this program. They could tell our water heaters, you know what, folks, right now there is an excess of solar energy being produced. We don't even know what to do with it all. We're going to have to curtail it. Everyone's water heater should switch on right now and start charging up the water. We can do things like demand response, where we say, you know what, actually now we've got a real problem. People's air conditioners can't stay on. We're almost at brownout, and it could send a signal to those water heaters saying, hey, everybody, chill out, turn off. We don't need you to heat water right now. Right now, we got people that need to stay cool. So there is a lot we could do in the future with careful coordination between the power company and the grid and these appliances. It's not being done. I'll be very honest with you. There's research that's going on, and there are people that are putting the steps in order to get there eventually, but it's not out there on the market right now that I know of. And I don't think it precludes some of these appliances from being backdated. Again, if you've got something that has some wireless protocol that can talk to your home automation or talk to the internet, there's a good chance that it could eventually be automated without having to be replaced. Roger asks, could you comment on the cost of electricity from rooftop solar compared to SDG&E? I just replaced our rooftop system and the net cost is about $1 per watt. Did some work myself and it was an owner install, but I did pay some workers to install the panels on the roof. I'm not an expert on the current state of affairs with solar, but I do want to point one thing out, and that is that right now net metering is back under the microscope again. They're a magnifying glass. They're looking at what went right with net metering 1, what went right with net metering 2, and what went wrong with those two systems as they designed net metering 3. So I'll just leave it at that. There's a big debate going on up in Sacramento at the CEC and the PUC about what are we going to do with net metering. If you're really interested in that, if you're a solar person, I recommend you try to read all 17 proposals that came from all of the different organizations, including Sierra Club and the IOUs, about what to do next with net metering. But I'm sorry, I can't really field the question about the cost of electricity from rooftop solar compared to SDG&E. I will say something about CCEs, because we don't talk about that, or we haven't talked about that for a few months here at the North County Climate Change Alliance. We have two CCEs, two CCAs. Those terms are kind of used interchangeably. We have two community choice aggregators here in the county. One is called SDCP, San Diego Community Power. That's 5 cities, including the city of San Diego. So that's the big one. And then we have the Clean Energy Alliance. And that includes 3 smaller cities, Del Mar, Solana Beach, and Carlsbad. And those 2 CCAs represent a good number of our cities, but it's not all of our cities. And just this week, the county has redeclared their interest in going to join a CCA rather than start their own. So they're moving forward in the right direction. That's the unincorporated. So all of the homes that are in the unincorporated space that are currently under SDG&E, we will eventually get access to a CCA, which is great news. And those CCAs potentially can lower our electricity bills. Right now, they're still charging, not as much, but they're still charging pretty high rates because there's this PCIA extra rate charge that we have to be charged to make up for the fact that customers are leaving SDG&E and they made these long-term contracts for power, and they now can't fulfill those long-term contracts. So they get to stick it back to us to help pay for those things. So there's work going on right now in Sacramento where they're trying to unwind some of the PCIA fees by saying, well, SDG&E, you can get out of those contracts by just agreeing to sell that power back to the CCAs. Sorry, that's a lot of acronym salad, but I just want to let you know things are getting better. Investing in solar is still wise right now. It's going to get harder because some of those federal rebates are drying up, and the NEM 3.0 is going to change how much advantage there is for putting rooftop solar on. So if you're close to putting rooftop solar on, I suggest that you do it now. Don't wait. How we doing here, folks? I'm sorry, but I'm taking time to read these. So if somebody else has read a question that they know is a good one, Meryl or Robert, please step in and read those out loud. Oh, here's a question from SS about passive and active solar thermal options. So the idea of designing a home to make use of the sun, which is great. That's awesome. And people have been doing that for a long time, and they will continue to do it. And that's not something our coalition is working on at all, to be very honest with you. But that is something that probably some of the architects and the green building folks that work within our coalition are either aware of or excited about people trying to do. I got into a debate recently with someone at the Eco Rotary Club of Solana Beach about how important is it for us to keep using those solar thermal water heaters that are on the roof. Merrill has one. I helped him clean it one day. And it was kind of a legacy system from the home that he moved into. But my take on it from the reading that I've done is that using solar thermal to heat water used to be a pretty good solution in the 70s and the 80s. It is not considered to be a very cost-effective solution anymore because there are fewer and fewer people who are still supporting and building out systems like that. For the most part, what people are recommending is to just expand your solar photovoltaic if you're already having a system like that, if you're about to build one, put a few extra panels on there, and then get a heat pump water heater, which, as we said numerous times tonight, sort of breaks one of those rules about efficiency and makes the most use of the available heat around the area. That is a whole lot better even than trying to keep a solar thermal rooftop system from leaking and keeping it maintained, because they can be a maintenance nightmare. They're probably great for people that really like to be hands-on, or people that want to try to install something themselves and they're interested in that. I was told that they were very expensive. And someone tried to correct me on that and said, no, I built them for years. They were only $2,500. But the truth is he had stopped building them in the 80s. So I don't really know what they cost now, but I think they've costed themselves out basically. So they're not really as viable as they used to be. And I will say also that they're used all over the world. So if you look at photographs of people in lots of other countries, you'll see a set of solar panels and a tank right there up on the roof. So they're not a dead technology completely. They just may not make sense if we're already building solar photovoltaic systems here on our roofs. So I want to address this question about can we do rapid union-led building conservation, retrofit, and renewables front and center? Just like, how do we do the retrofitting? Listen, if you're interested in that, whoever SS is, I want you to join the coalition. But I also want you to understand that there's a lot of people trying to do this work up and down the state. And we are trying to work sort of in a strategic way in coordination with each other. And what I've been told from folks that have been doing this for a while and are really working hard to do it right we're not really in a correct situation to start really impressing upon everybody, this is the day we start retrofitting everyone's houses. Now I say that because if we don't have everything lined up, if these units like the heat pumps, space heaters that I talked about earlier, if you're not walking down the aisles of Lowe's and Home Depot and seeing, 12 models lined up there for you to choose from, right? If you're not seeing a preponderance of heat pump water heaters as a ubiquitous solution, we're also not expecting that they're going to be the most cost-effective solutions. Right now, they're still considered to be niche and a little bit bleeding edge in the market. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It does cost more to make a heat pump water heater. There's more parts to it. So I think they will always cost more than a standard electric water heater. But some of the extra cost that's built into it is the conversion, what it takes to retrofit your house, right? Running new electric lines. And having a plumber come out, and just something as simple as an evaporation line that has to come off of a heat pump water heater causes a little bit more for that plumber to figure out what to do. He's got to cut a hole in your wall and install a drip line that goes out to the exterior. Little stuff like that makes it so that I can't tell you, yeah, let's all go do retrofitting today. In my heart, I really want to do that. And what I'd like to do at the SDBEC is get us all talking about it and coming up with great strategies that we can help share with the rest of the community that's trying to get this done. And our thought is to share those with each other and come up with fantastic strategies before we go to elected officials and get ahead of ourselves and say, you need to do this. Because if we ask for it too soon and there are not cost-effective solutions for it, we'll get a lot of pushback from homeowners that are saying, like, you can't force us and mandate for us to do this if the appliances aren't out there and they're not cost-effective. And on the case of cost-effective, when you buy the most efficient appliances, they really are cost-effective. They always are. And even in our climate zones, they are. So this stuff is proven to be the right move. But because there's additional cost in doing it in retrofit, we're not really there yet where we're advocating for that. That's why Robert pointed out in the beginning. Right now, our goal is to create ordinances that demand this of new construction, where it's really easy and really logical for folks to put the right stuff in right now and not put gas in. That $6,000 to $10,000, I think it's $3,000 to $10,000 at an average of $6,000 to run gas lines to your house. That's not to run from the end of your driveway into your house. It's the combined cost of running it to your development and then running it down all the streets in your development and then running it into your house and then running it through your house because you may have several gas lines. So all that combined stuff is an average of $6,000 per house. And so if you could use that to spend on the appliances instead, because the home is already going to be wired for electricity no matter what, this helps make the new construction a lot more cost effective. And another thing I don't think we talked too much about, Robert mentioned it probably in the beginning. In 2019, we have a mandate starting in 2019, Title 24 code, which kicked off in January 2020. All new residences that are 2 stories and 1 story, they all have to have solar. Now that's really important because when they put that mandate in that said you have to get solar, they also said that solar has to cover the amount of electricity that your house uses. Now, if you create a house design that's mixed, that has gas and electric, that means that the requirement to put the solar on is just to cover the electric. And frankly, in most mixed houses, your electric is small. It's just covering, I have a computer on, I have a radio on. Sorry, I still listen to the radio sometimes. I have lights on, right? Those are the minimal things that you use electricity for. But heating your water, heating your space, and then that dryer and your cooking, that stuff, if that's all being done with gas, you're not going to put a large enough solar system on there to cover all those electric needs that you may have to do later when we do regulate gas. That's a possibility. We may regulate gas, maybe not in the near future, but eventually we're not going to be using gas in our homes anymore. So that means you'll be stuck with a house that doesn't have the right sized solar on it. That maybe, I think it'll have the right outlets because we're requiring that now to get these new homes set up so that they can be retrofitted with electric a lot easier. But if you were to build it all electric in the first place, the extra cost of putting more panels on is not very high because you've already got the solar installer out there. You've already paid for the sales people that have, they have to get their cut in the entire solar market. I believe that when you buy a new house right now, it doesn't come with solar. The developers are not putting solar on the houses. Some of them may be doing that, but a lot of them, what they're doing is they're saying, by the way, to finish your permit and move into your house, you're also going to have to hire a solar installer to come right after we give you your key and go install that solar. And you have to get it done by a certain date because that's the requirement. So it's still something you have to go and do as a homeowner anyway. It makes a whole lot more sense to go all electric, put the extra solar on for the minimal extra cost. It used to be that the big cost in solar was those modules. Those were very expensive in times past. Now the big parts of the expense are coming in no matter what size system you get, and adding those extra panels to make it a lot higher amount of solar doesn't cost appreciably more. Carolyn asked, is the behavior and effect of liquid gas the same as natural gas? No, definitely different things altogether. But I have heard someone make an analogy, which I think is pretty important. We all grew up understanding that if you were to run a car in a garage with the door closed, you can get asphyxiated. You get carbon monoxide poisoning. We know people have used that as a suicide technique. It's an awful thing. It's dangerous, and it unfortunately happens to people by accident sometimes. But it's a good analogy to have because when you are burning gasoline, which is definitely different than methane, you do have these toxins that happen during the combustion, and you can't always see them and you can't always smell them, but they are dangerous to your health. And we have to make that same parallel with when we're using combustion inside the houses. So when you're burning on the stove, for example, that example that you heard Robert talk about earlier of simmering on the stove, that's something that a coworker or an associate of mine in the community, her name's Letitia, and she works for Environmental Health Coalition. And she told me, as I go to homes and do audits and try to help people assess their homes and figure out what's working good, what's not, and is your home healthy? She says, I see people and they use dried beans in these communities, and because you're using dried beans and you're eating beans at many meals of the week, you may be cooking beans twice a week or more. And the way that you cook beans, we all know, you cook them on the stove slowly for an hour up to 3 hours. When you do that, if you're in a sealed room because you didn't have a vent, some of these rental homes don't even have vents. She showed me pictures. It's not even legal to do that, but it doesn't stop some landlords from installing a gas oven that doesn't have a proper vent. And then she would tell them, you need to open a window every time you operate this stove. But she'd go to pull the window open and realize that window's painted shut. But the one, a room over, that window still is functioning, right? She's dealing with people that are in low-income housing. And so I want everyone to be aware of that idea that we are breathing in toxins when we're operating our stoves. I can't stress enough, please use your vents. And that's one place where it is appropriate to think of it in terms of the stuff that comes out of your tailpipe can kill you, and the stuff that you're breathing in from combustion on the stove, it won't necessarily kill you right away. It's more of a chronic ailment thing, but you don't want to harm your own health by breathing that stuff in. Eva, so who do we call to get a heat pump retrofitted in our home? I was listening to KPBS the other day, and there is some electrical supply or plumber person on there who is actually touting that they are a heat pump supplier in San Diego. So I guess what I could tell you is listen to KPBS for a couple of hours, and you may hear that advertiser try to deliver their pitch. And also, if you get that name, forward it to me, because we want them to join that SDBEC. Unfortunately, I was driving and I didn't get a chance to write it down. But
if it's Anderson, they're really pricey.
Okay.
And they've advertised on PBS, but they are very expensive.
Yeah, I think it was a different company, but I guess what I'd say, I guess what I say is I don't know what to expect when you have a niche person that knows this stuff and they're the only ones in town. We probably expect that they're going to charge a little bit more than the other people because they're the only game in town, but they also have expertise that nobody else has. So that's probably worth paying something extra for.
I think it's something called Sorari or something like that.
Okay, awesome. Well, if someone finds them, like I said, please forward them to me because I think it'd be great for them to partner with the SDBEC if they're a local contractor. We are trying to make inroads with the local supply houses and make sure that they have a constant supply of all the things that people want to get installed. And then we want to talk to the contractors and make sure that they're trying to upsell these things to people because most people don't get asked. I know Niels is on here and he had to replace a water heater. He did get it replaced with electric, which was fantastic, but his installer didn't recommend to him, well, what about a heat pump water heater? Why don't you want to go that way? So he would have been well served to have a plumber installer that was really interested in this stuff that would have said, Niels, I see that you're like this eco guy. Are you sure you don't want this something that's even better? So sorry to bring that up, Niels. I know that that's a sore spot with you, but I think it's a good teachable moment for us all that if we don't let the installers know this, it's going to take us that much longer to get the good stuff installed. So
I'm going to chime in here for just a moment, guys. I am absolutely awestruck by the amazing comments. So I would love to urge everybody who's still with us to click on those 3 dots at the bottom of your chat and save this chat file because there's really a wealth of information, including a very exciting link that I put in at 7:24 p.m. to the Rethink X folks who are shooting for 100% renewables between 2030 and 2035. And it really does put things into perspective here. But I want to take a moment and thank our presenters for tonight. You guys did a really great job. And I would also like to bring Marion on for a moment here to share something with us. And while I do a screen share myself. Marion?
As you know, we are dedicated to try to bring really top-notch speakers to our group. And we just want to express our appreciation to Robert and Karl and for your time and all the research that you did for doing this and educating us. And so we have purchased a couple of trees for you in honor of you, and they will be planted in an area in California that has been burnt by wildflowers. So Karl, I have your address, but Robert, if you'll email me and give me yours, I will happily send you your certificate. And again, thank you so much. And thank you to our wonderful audience today. I agree with you, Meryl. The comments were really outstanding. So thank you to all of you.
thank you very much, Marion. That's fantastic. I didn't ever dream that I would get one of these trees that we've been giving to our other speakers. So thank you very much for that. You know, I also want to recognize the fact that we've got folks that are not from San Diego that are here. And I appreciate you folks bearing with us, talking a lot of nerdy stuff about our particular region. But I want to thank you for coming and joining us. It's really awesome that we have such a broad community and that because we had some world-class speakers over the last year, that Meryl's done a really awesome job at helping to recruit and come and speak for us. That's helped expand our audience a lot. So we really appreciate folks from all over coming to join us. It's almost unfortunate that our name is North County Climate Change Alliance, because if you're from another country, you're like, North which county, you know, like, but we really appreciate everyone being here. It's fantastic that you're all involved in this. Again, if you're interested in doing any work with building electrification, or if you just want to learn more, please go and visit that website. And I don't know if I pointed it out, but North County Climate Change Alliance is a member of that coalition. So Marion's in a working group. I think Joe may be in a working group. I'm doing a ton of work with the different working groups there. So we are part of this. It's not just something that we're reporting to you today. This group is a part of that coalition. And so we urge you, if you're interested in doing that work, we can find you a space to work within the working groups and really help move this forward. It's a neat thing because it's one of those things that a lot of the other stuff that we talk about, maybe it's an individual measure or it's great policy, but you can't really make any progress. How are you going to make this all happen? And in the case of building electrification, we actually have some real concrete targets here. At passing these building electrification ordinances could cause a ripple effect that will make the CEC rule in a different way and change the Title 24 code so that we go all electric in a cycle earlier, or that they really beef things up. So all the work that we're doing now is going to pay off a lot. It's going to help people in Los Angeles that haven't been able to get this done yet. People in Santa Barbara are working on this. I have bi-weekly meetings with young people all over the state that are out there doing this work, getting this message out. And it's really exciting to see so many people trying so hard at this effort.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Robert.
Everybody.
Carl, thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Stay safe.